The morning sun filtered through the busy streets of downtown as Lisa moved silently among the crowds. Unlike the hurrying humans around her, her form shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. If anyone could have seen her, which they couldn't. At least that's what she believed. Lisa belonged to a species that existed partially out of phase with regular spacetime. Her people called themselves the Drifters, though no human knew this name. They had arrived on Earth decades ago, believing they had found the perfect planet to observe and study, secure in their natural invisibility. Every morning, Lisa would leave her hidden dwelling, a converted maintenance space in an old apartment building, and walk among the humans. She had learned their language by listening, learned their customs by watching, and grown to love their world without ever being able to participate in it. Today, she paused near a young mother struggling with a stroller. The baby inside was crying, and the mother dropped her phone while trying to manage both the stroller and a coffee cup. Without thinking, Lisa reached down to pick up the phone, then stopped herself. Her hand passed through it like smoke through air. She couldn't interact with physical objects when fully phased out, another limitation of her species. The mother eventually retrieved her phone, never knowing how close she had been to an alien who wanted to help. Lisa felt the familiar ache in her chest, the longing to reach out and make a difference in someone's life, anyone's life. She continued her morning walk, passing by the familiar storefronts. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery made her wish she could buy a loaf. Her species could eat human food, but only if they partially phased in, something strictly forbidden by their society's rules. Contact with humans was considered too dangerous, too unpredictable. At the crosswalk, Lisa watched a group of friends laughing together. They were planning their weekend, talking about movies and dinner plans. She had watched countless human films through windows and in parks where people played movies on summer nights. She understood their jokes, their references, their shared cultural moments, but could never share in them herself. A street musician played guitar nearby, his case open for tips. Lisa hummed along with the melody, knowing her voice would never reach human ears. Music was one of the things that had first drawn her to human culture. Her people had nothing like it. Their society focused on practical matters, on survival and observation. In the pocket of her phase-shifted clothing, Lisa carried a journal. It wasn't a physical journal. It existed in the same state she did, but it contained years of observations about humanity. She had documented their kindness, their creativity, their resilience, and yes, sometimes their cruelty. But mostly, she wrote about their connections. Humans seemed to need each other in a way her species never had. They formed bonds, relationships, communities. They reached out to strangers, helped each other, shared their lives in ways that fascinated and puzzled her. Her own people lived solitary lives, coming together only for necessary meetings about their observation mission. As the day grew warmer, Lisa made her way to her favorite spot, a small coffee shop on the corner of Oak and Main. She liked to sit in an empty chair, whenever there was one, and pretend she was just another customer enjoying her morning coffee. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine what it would be like to actually order a drink, to have the barista smile at her, to be part of this world she observed so carefully. Little did Lisa know that her entire understanding of her place in this world was about to change. As she settled into her usual corner spot, she didn't notice the new barista behind the counter, a quiet, observant man who had just started his morning shift. She didn't see the way his eyes flickered briefly in her direction, or how he paused for just a moment too long while wiping down the counter near her table. For now, she remained in her bubble of isolation, content in her belief that she was completely invisible to the world around her. But soon, very soon, that bubble would burst in the most unexpected way. Another morning dawned at the coffee shop, and Lisa took her usual spot by the window. The chair, worn and comfortable, felt familiar even though she couldn't truly feel it. She watched the morning rush with the same fascination she'd had for the past year. The new barista, Tom, moved with quiet efficiency behind the counter. He was different from the previous workers, less chatty, more observant. Lisa noticed how he anticipated customers' needs before they spoke, how he watched the room with careful attention. Today, something unusual happened. As Tom cleaned tables, he paused near Lisa's spot. His hand hesitated over her table, though it appeared empty to everyone else. She held her breath, an unnecessary reflex for her species, as he wiped the surface. His movements seemed deliberate, almost as if, but no, that was impossible. Lisa pulled out her phase-shifted notebook and began her daily observations. She had developed a routine. Document the morning crowd, note any interesting human interactions, and sketch the occasional customer who caught her attention. Today, she found herself drawing Tom's profile as he worked the espresso machine. The regulars filed in one by one. There was the businessman in his crisp suit who always ordered a double espresso, the college student with purple hair who needed her extra-large caramel latte, and the elderly couple who shared a muffin every Tuesday. Lisa knew them all, their habits, their preferences, their small daily dramas. But something felt different today. Tom kept glancing in her direction when no one else was watching. Once, he even seemed to smile slightly toward her corner. Lisa told herself she was imagining things, that her loneliness was making her see patterns that weren't there. During a lull in customers, Tom began arranging the pastry display. He hummed softly, the same song Lisa had been humming yesterday. Her heart raced. Pure coincidence, she thought. It had to be. The song had been playing on the shop's radio yesterday. Lisa watched as Tom served a young couple who sat at the table next to hers. As he set down their drinks, he stumbled slightly, his hand brushing through the space where her shoulder would be. She felt a strange tingle, like static electricity, where his hand passed through her form. Alarmed, Lisa stood up quickly. In all her years of observation, no human had ever caused such a sensation. She considered leaving, breaking her routine for the first time in months. But curiosity kept her rooted to the spot. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, creating long shadows across the floor. Tom was cleaning again, this time moving methodically from table to table. When he reached her corner, he paused longer than necessary. Lisa noticed his eyes weren't focused on the table, but slightly above it, exactly where her face would be if he could see her. Then he did something that made her freeze. He placed a small paper napkin on her table, and on it, he had written something. Lisa leaned forward, her heart pounding as she read the words. "I know you're there." She stared at the napkin, her mind racing. It couldn't be meant for her. Perhaps it was a note for another customer, or part of some human game she didn't understand. But Tom's eyes flickered to the napkin, then to where she sat, and back again. Lisa's hands trembled as she reached for the napkin, forgetting for a moment that she couldn't touch it. Her fingers passed through the paper, leaving it undisturbed. Tom watched the space where her hand moved, and this time, she was certain, he smiled directly at her. For the first time in her life, Lisa felt truly seen. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. As closing time approached, she remained in her seat, watching Tom clean up for the night. He moved with the same quiet purpose, but now each action seemed to carry a message. "I see you. You're not alone." When he finally left, turning off the lights and locking the door, he paused. In the darkness, he turned toward her usual spot and gave a small, deliberate wave. Lisa sat in the darkened cafe long after he'd gone, staring at the napkin and wondering how everything she thought she knew about her world had changed in a single day. The next morning came with a sense of dread and excitement for Lisa. She stood outside the coffee shop for nearly an hour, watching Tom set up for the day through the window. Her usual routine felt dangerous now, like stepping into unknown territory. Finally, gathering her courage, she drifted through the door as a customer was leaving. The bell chimed, and Tom looked up. His eyes seemed to track her movement as she made her way to her corner. Lisa felt exposed, vulnerable. Sensations entirely new to her species. Tom worked quietly through the morning rush, but she noticed small things. How he would turn slightly toward her location when no one was watching. how he seemed to pause whenever he passed near her. Each gesture confirmed what she had feared and hoped. He really could sense her presence. During a quiet moment, Tom approached her table. He carried a steaming cup of coffee, which he placed precisely where she sat. The warmth from the cup passed through her phase-shifted form, creating an unusual sensation. "I like to imagine you might be a coffee person," he said softly, pretending to wipe the table. "I've been watching you watch us for months now." Lisa sat perfectly still, her mind racing. Should she try to communicate? Should she flee? Everything she had been taught about human contact screamed at her to leave. "I don't know if you can speak," Tom continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if you can, I want you to know that you're safe here. I've known about you for a while." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "How?" Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, unused after so long in silence. Tom's eyes widened slightly at her response, but he maintained his casual cleaning posture. "I see heat signatures differently than most people. Some kind of rare genetic thing. You show up as a sort of shimmer, like watching heat waves rise from hot pavement." Lisa processed this information. Her species had never considered that humans might have such variations in their perception. They had assumed their phase-shifted state made them universally undetectable. "There are others like you," Tom said, moving to the next table but keeping his voice low. "I've seen them around the city, never as regularly as you, though." The revelation struck Lisa like a physical blow. "Others? You've seen others of my kind?" Tom nodded slightly. "They don't stay in one place like you do. They move around more. You're the first one I've tried to contact." "Why me?" Lisa asked, her curiosity overcoming her caution. Tom smiled, pretending to examine the napkin dispenser. "Because you seem lonely. I watch you watching people connect with each other. It seemed cruel not to reach out." A customer approached the counter, and Tom moved away smoothly, leaving Lisa to process this conversation. Her mind whirled with implications. If this human could see her kind, how many others might have this ability? What did this mean for her people's presence on Earth? When the shop quieted again, Tom returned. "I'm off work in an hour. If you're willing, I'd like to talk more." Really talk, not this pretending to clean business. Lisa hesitated. Every instinct, every rule she'd been taught, told her to refuse. But something stronger pushed her forward, the desperate desire to finally connect with someone after years of isolation. "Yes," she said softly. "I'd like that." Tom smiled, and this time he looked directly at where she sat. "There's a small park behind the shop. Meet me there." Lisa nodded, then remembered he probably couldn't see the gesture clearly. "I'll be there." As Tom returned to work, Lisa sat with her incorporeal hands wrapped around the coffee cup he brought her. She couldn't drink it, of course, but the gesture itself felt more warming than any beverage could be. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt the beginnings of hope. Hope that perhaps she wasn't destined to remain an observer forever. The hour passed both too quickly and too slowly. As she watched Tom prepare to end his shift, Lisa knew she was about to break every rule her people had established. And surprisingly, she found she didn't care. The park behind the coffee shop was small and quiet, with a single bench tucked away under an old oak tree. Tom sat down, appearing to casual observers as if he was simply taking a break after his shift. Lisa hovered nearby, still maintaining her phase-shifted state. "You can sit," Tom said quietly, looking straight ahead. "I won't try to touch you or anything. I just want to talk." Lisa settled onto the bench, keeping a careful distance. "How long have you known about me?" she asked. "About 3 months," Tom replied, feeding breadcrumbs to nearby pigeons as cover for their conversation. "At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but then I noticed how regularly you came in, always sitting in the same spot, watching everyone." "I've been careful," Lisa said, a note of defensiveness in her voice. "No one has ever noticed before." Tom smiled slightly. "Actually, that's not entirely true. Remember Mike, the old janitor who used to work nights? Lisa nodded, then remembered to speak her acknowledgement. Yes, I remember him. He could sense you too. Not like I can, but he always knew when you were around. Said the air felt different, like just before a lightning strike. Lisa absorbed this information with growing amazement. How many humans can detect us? More than your people probably realize, Tom said, tossing another handful of crumbs. We're just not all obvious about it. Some people sense temperature changes, others see light distortions, and a few, like me, can see heat signatures that shouldn't be there. This changes everything, Lisa whispered. Our entire mission was based on the assumption that we were undetectable. Tom turned slightly toward her. Can I ask why you're here? On Earth, I mean. Lisa hesitated, then decided that after breaking so many rules already, one more couldn't hurt. We're observers. We study developing civilizations, learning about them without interfering. Earth was supposed to be a perfect observation post because humans supposedly couldn't detect us. But you've gone beyond just observing, haven't you? Tom's voice was gentle. You've grown attached to us. I've seen how you react to people's stories, their joys and sorrows. Is it that obvious? Lisa asked, embarrassed. Only to someone who's been watching you as carefully as you've been watching everyone else, Tom replied with a small smile. A comfortable silence fell between them. A couple walked past, arm in arm, completely unaware of the extraordinary conversation happening on the bench. I need to show you something, Tom said finally, pulling out his phone. He opened a social media app and showed her a private group. There's a whole community of people who can sense beings like you. We call ourselves the Aware. We've been documenting sightings and interactions for years. Lisa leaned closer, forgetting her caution as she read the posts. There were descriptions of encounters, theories about the phase-shifted beings, and even crude attempts at sketches that came surprisingly close to depicting her species' true form. This is impossible, she breathed. Our entire understanding of human perception has been wrong. Not wrong, Tom corrected, just incomplete. Like how we didn't know about you until some of us started noticing the signs. What do you want from me? Lisa asked suddenly, her old fears surfacing. Why are you sharing all this? Tom turned to face her directly, his eyes finding her location with uncanny accuracy. Because I think it's time for both our species to stop pretending. We know you're here. You know we can sense you. Maybe it's time for real contact, not just observation. The weight of his words settled over Lisa. She thought about her years of lonely watching, of wanting to reach out, of all the connections she yearned to make. I can't speak for my entire species, she said slowly, but I think you're right. It's time for a change. We can start small, Tom suggested. Just you and me, talking like this. Then maybe, when you're ready, you can meet others who can sense you. For the first time in years, Lisa felt her isolation beginning to crack. Here, on this bench with a human who could see her, she was no longer just an observer. She was becoming a participant in the world she had watched for so long. I'd like that, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Over the next few weeks, Lisa learned to partially phase into normal space under Tom's guidance. It started with small things, a flicker here, a shimmer there. The process was like learning to use a muscle she never knew she had. Focus on wanting to be seen, Tom had suggested during one of their early morning sessions in the empty coffee shop. Your people developed this ability to hide, but maybe you can control it the other way too. Lisa concentrated, feeling the strange sensation of her form becoming more solid. The air around her seemed to thicken, and for a brief moment, she caught her own reflection in the shop window, a faint outline against the glass. That's it, Tom exclaimed, his eyes brightening. I can see you much clearer now. You're doing great. The shop's early morning stillness was broken by the arrival of Anna, another barista. She walked in, started to greet Tom, then stopped abruptly, staring at the space where Lisa stood. Tom. Anna's voice wavered. Is there someone standing there? Tom looked at Lisa questioningly. She nodded, maintaining her partial phase state despite her nervousness. "Yes," Tom said calmly. "Anna, I'd like you to meet someone special. This is Lisa. She's not exactly from around here." Anna's eyes widened as Lisa's form became more visible, still transparent, like looking through frosted glass, but undeniably present. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I felt something in here for months. Like a presence. That was you." Lisa found her voice, though it sounded faint and ethereal. "Yes, I've been coming here for a long time. I'm sorry if I scared you." To everyone's surprise, Anna laughed. "Scared? No, it always felt friendly, like having a guardian angel in the shop." She stepped closer, examining Lisa's shimmering form with fascination. "This is amazing. Are there others like you?" "Yes," Lisa admitted, "but they don't know I'm doing this. It's not something we're supposed to do." The door chimed as the first customer of the day entered. Lisa instinctively started to fade back into full phase shift, but Tom's gentle voice stopped her. "Stay," he said softly. "Just maintain what you're doing now. Most people won't notice unless they're really looking, but those who can sense you, let them see." Throughout the morning, Lisa stayed partially phased, watching reactions. Most customers went about their business, unseeing, but every so often, someone would pause, look around curiously, or stare directly at her location with wondering eyes. By lunchtime, 3 more people had noticed her. Each reaction was different: surprise, curiosity, even quiet acceptance. One elderly woman simply smiled and said, "About time you showed yourself, dear. I've been feeling your presence for months." The day brought more surprises. A young girl tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing at Lisa and saying, "Look, Mommy, an angel." The mother apologized for her daughter's imagination, but Lisa saw understanding in the child's eyes. During a quiet moment, Anna approached Lisa's corner. "You know," she said, wiping down a nearby table, "I always put fresh flowers on this table because it felt right, like someone was here to appreciate them." "I did appreciate them," Lisa replied softly. "They made me feel less invisible, even when I thought no one could see me." Tom watched this exchange with a smile. "See," he said when Anna moved away, "the world's ready for you. Maybe not for everything at once, but for this gentle revelation. They're ready." Lisa thought about her people, about their rules and fears. "We were wrong," she said quietly. "We thought we needed to stay hidden to study humanity, but we're missing so much by not interacting, by not connecting." "Every bridge needs to start somewhere," Tom replied. "Maybe you're building the first span." As the day drew to a close, Lisa realized she felt different. The weight of isolation had lifted, replaced by something new: hope, possibility, and the first real sense of belonging she'd ever known on Earth. Looking around the coffee shop that had become her sanctuary, Lisa made a decision. She would stay visible, stay connected. It was time for her people to stop watching and start participating in the world they had observed for so long. The bridge between worlds had to start somewhere. Why not here? Why not now? 1 month after Lisa's first partial phasing, she noticed something unusual at the coffee shop. Another shimmer, like her own, hovering near the pastry display. She wasn't the only one who saw it. Tom's subtle nod confirmed her observation. Unlike Lisa's now semi-visible state, this figure remained fully phase-shifted. She approached carefully, speaking in the musical language of her people. "You don't have to hide. Some of them can see us anyway." The shimmer jumped, startled. You're breaking protocol," a male voice responded in their language. "And you're partially phased. How? Why?" "Because it's time for change," Lisa said simply. "I'm Pat," the other being introduced himself, gradually becoming more visible as his curiosity overcame his caution. Tom watched from behind the counter as the 2 shimmering forms conversed. Other customers who could sense them tried to act natural, but their quick glances revealed their awareness. "There are more of us," Pat revealed after a long discussion. We've been watching you these past weeks. Some think you've gone mad. Others, others are fascinated. Lisa wasn't surprised. Bring them here, she suggested. Not all at once, but gradually. Let them see what's possible. Over the next few days, more drifters began appearing at the coffee shop. They came cautiously at first, maintaining their phase shift, but curiosity drew them closer to visibility. Tom and Anna welcomed each one, creating a safe space for this unprecedented contact. One morning, a group of regular customers who could sense the drifters approached Tom. "We want to help," said Mark, a professor of anthropology, who had been watching the situation unfold. "Maybe we could create a formal meeting space." The idea spread quickly among the aware. A vacant office above the coffee shop was rented, and soon it became an unofficial embassy. Humans who could sense the drifters met with those willing to partially phase, sharing stories and building understanding. Lisa found herself at the center of it all, teaching other drifters how to control their phasing while helping humans understand their nature. "We're not so different," she explained during one meeting. "We all seek connection, understanding, growth." The community grew organically. Artists who could see the drifters began creating portraits, capturing their ethereal beauty. Scientists who could sense them proposed theories about their phase-shifted state. Children, who often saw them most clearly, drew pictures of their shimmer friends. But not everyone approved. One evening, a senior member of the Drifter Observation Mission arrived at the coffee shop. His form was rigid with disapproval as he confronted Lisa. "You've compromised everything we stand for," he declared. "Our mission is to observe, not interact." Lisa stood her ground, now comfortable in her semi-visible state. "Look around you." She gestured to the humans and drifters sharing the space. "They already knew we were here. We're not compromising our mission. We're expanding it." "And what of the humans who cannot sense us?" he demanded. "What happens when they learn of our existence?" Tom stepped forward. "We're handling that carefully," he said, though the drifter elder couldn't see him clearly. "Those who can sense you are helping prepare others for the idea that they're not alone in the universe." The elder was silent for a long moment, observing the peaceful interactions around him. Finally, he spoke. Perhaps our old protocols need revision." That evening, as Lisa helped close the coffee shop, she felt a profound sense of achievement. The community she had helped build was more than just a bridge between species. It was a model for how change could happen gradually, naturally, led by understanding and connection rather than fear. "You've started something remarkable," Tom said as they locked up. "A whole new way for our species to interact." Lisa thought about how far she'd come from the lonely observer she used to be. "We all did this together," she replied. "Every human who sensed us, but kept our secret, every drifter brave enough to become visible. We're all building this new reality." Above the coffee shop, the lights in the makeshift embassy still glowed, casting a warm light over the street. Inside, humans and drifters continued their careful dance of revelation and understanding, creating a future neither species had imagined possible. The wall between observer and observed had cracked, and through that crack, something beautiful was growing. 6 months had passed since Lisa first became visible, and the world had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The coffee shop had become famous among those who knew, a place where the veil between worlds had first thinned, then gracefully parted. Lisa stood at the front of the embassy's main room, now officially recognized by both human and drifter authorities. She had been chosen as the first official ambassador of her species, a role she still found surprising. "The transition must be gradual," she explained to the mixed group of humans and drifters before her. "We've learned that sudden revelations can be harmful, but connection can change everything." Tom watched from his usual spot, proud of how far she had come. Their relationship had deepened over the months, becoming something unique, a bridge between species in its own right. They had found ways to interact despite their different physical states, proving that connection transcended physical barriers. "Ambassador," a young drifter approached her after the meeting. "I've been fully phase-shifted my whole life. The idea of being seen. It terrifies me, but I want to try. Lisa smiled, remembering her own journey. Fear is natural, she said gently, but so is growth. We'll help you find your way. The embassy had developed programs to help drifters learn partial phasing and humans cope with their varying abilities to perceive them. Scientists from both species worked together, understanding the mechanics of phase shifting while respecting its mysteries. That evening, Lisa and Tom sat in their usual spot in the coffee shop, now closed for the day. "Remember when you thought you were invisible?" he asked, smiling at the memory. "I remember being lonely," she replied, her form shimming in the dim light. "I never imagined this future, any of it." Their quiet moment was interrupted by Anna rushing in, excited. "They've approved it," she exclaimed. "The International Committee has agreed to begin wider public disclosure next month." The news they'd been waiting for. After months of careful preparation, humanity would officially learn about the drifters, not through dramatic revelation or crisis, but through carefully planned education and gradual exposure. "Are we ready?" Tom asked, looking at Lisa. She thought about the community they'd built, the understanding they'd fostered. "We're ready," she answered confidently. "Both our species have grown so much." Later that night, Lisa stood on the roof of the building, looking out over the city. Other drifters were visible now, their shimmering forms moving through the streets below. Some fully phase-shifted, others partially visible like her, each finding their own way to exist in this new world. Tom joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee, one he could drink, one that would sit untouched but appreciated, thinking deep thoughts. "Thinking about change," she replied. "How one small moment can ripple outward. One person reaching out, one voice speaking up, one hand extended in friendship." He nodded, understanding. "You know, some people still can't see you clearly, but they know you're here now, and that's changed everything." Lisa thought about her earlier self, the observer who had sat silently in corners, yearning for connection. "We don't have to see something perfectly to know it's real," she said softly. "Sometimes just knowing something exists is enough to change how we view the world." The city lights twinkled below them, and more drifters emerged as night fell. Their natural time for observation turned now to participation. The world was changing, becoming richer, more complex, more connected. "What happens next?" Tom asked, though they both knew the answer. "We keep building bridges," Lisa replied. "We keep reaching out. We keep showing that different doesn't mean distant, that unseen doesn't mean unknown." She looked at the coffee shop below, where it all began. A simple place where one human had reached out to someone he barely saw, someone who thought she was invisible. That small act of connection had started something extraordinary. Lisa smiled, her form glowing softly in the gathering darkness. She was no longer invisible, no longer just an observer. She had become something else entirely. A bridge between worlds, a symbol of connection, a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes start with the simplest acts of reaching out. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities, and Lisa was ready to face it. Visible, connected, and never alone again.